Yo, what's up, everybody? You are back on the house list with your host, me, Peter Agustin. Welcome back. Doing a special 2-show episode this week. Typically, I put my episodes up like late Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. But I wanted to drop 2 this week. One, because there's no rules here whatsoever, since this is just me. I'm not beholden to any kind of schedule that someone's created for me. And 2, more importantly, is the guy that I have as a guest on the show this week, Andrew Broder, is doing 2 big shows in New York City on December 12th and 13th at the King's Theater in Brooklyn, supporting Bon Iver. So 2 shows with Bon Iver. He was just in Europe on a big tour, and we spoke right before he took off for that. And if any of you are familiar with Andrew, or rather, I should say, you may be familiar with him through his work as Fog. He's done a couple albums under the moniker of Fog, which at first started as a solo thing in 2000. The True Heads would have that. That's a self title, or it's called The Fog on Dinky Town Records. And then he did a few joints on Ninja Tune Lex Records, which was built out into more of a broader full band instrumentation of, like, guitars and drums and just like a big broader sound. But he put out a record this year, the top of this year, on the Minneapolis-based label Totally Gross National Product. That's pretty dope. It's called For Good. And this is kind of a return to form in that he is kind of back on the solo tip again, which is really cool. It's dope. It's got this a sort of similar aesthetic where it's there's a lot of like subtle DJ type shit in the mix, some beats as well as live instrumentation and playing. It's very like I'm not sure for sure, but I think he did produce and play everything on the record himself. I would think he definitely recorded most of it himself, if not the whole thing. But it's dope. It's really cool. And after we did this, we recorded this podcast, I went and saw him play, and it was as a duo performance. It was him and a young woman that was adding some accompaniment, like on a sampler or a keyboard. But he's a pretty talented dude. So I've known him for a while because briefly I contributed to the short-lived, albeit super unique, impactful print magazine from Minneapolis called Life Sucks Die. So it was like this crazy, like punk rock, graffiti, hip hop kind of just like kitchen sink style zine magazine. But it was dope. And I wrote reviews for it. And he was one of the main contributors, I would say, as a writer. It was a faction of guys in Minneapolis that have all gone on to do a lot of cool stuff, definitely in the arts world too, and design. If you're familiar with burlesque, if you're familiar with the artist Aaron Horkey, I hope I pronounced that right. I'm not going off of anything. I'm just going straight off the dome. So nevertheless, Andrew Broder, aka DJ Andrew, aka Fog, he is he's a really interesting dude, and just a unique individual within the context of the Minneapolis underground scene, the Minneapolis DJ hip hop sort of community of the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, and just like a really unique producer, and really amazing musician. Like I've seen some of his other bands play too, because he has a bunch of side projects too. Like if you want to nerd out and like learn a bunch about one particular artist, like just look into Andrew's catalog or go on Discogs or wherever and dig around and stuff, because the dude has some pretty a wide ranging brushstroke of his output. So anyway, big up to him. He came to the house while he was on tour. I warmed up some leftovers from the night before, and we caught up because I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I know him really through my deep connection to some of the guys from Anticon, particularly Dose One and Nostom and Gel, and but he's definitely all over, and Yoni Wolf as well. He's contributed a lot of stuff to all their records, and just a big part of that label's history as well. So we had a pretty cool conversation. Check it out, and I appreciate you coming through on the House List with your host Peter Agostin and our guest Andrew Broder. Let's check out our conversation right now. Not that I think that's probably the best starting point too. Is just is really just coming into what you were doing before Life Sucks Die, because then it was people just knew you as DJ Andrew.
Right. So so that would be like 98-ish, 98, 99. I was just DJing around the Twin Cities under the name DJ Andrew, making mixtapes, doing battles, just on like the local kind of level, and pretty much influenced by, the turntablist movement of the day, the Scratch Pickles and the X-Men and Dibs and Kid Koala and all that stuff was just kind of like percolating at that point. And so,
did you start you obviously started before that though?
I started DJing when I was like 15, when I got turntables first.
Where'd you get turntables? Do you get turntables from the source?
No, I didn't get them from the source. I was in I actually had a small role in a movie when I was 15, and I took the money that I got from that and bought turntables with it.
Really?
And just started buying 12 inches.
What was the movie?
It's called The Cure, and it's like it was like sort of an after-school special type of vibe, but a movie.
It was shot in Minneapolis?
I shot outside of Minneapolis, and I was in theater, I was doing plays and stuff like that, and so I went and auditioned with a buddy of mine and got a small part in this movie. It's about a little boy that has AIDS, and him and his friend have an adventure, and I actually play a bully, a teenage bully, me and two other. At one point, the scene that I'm in, what I know is on YouTube findable. I don't know that it's still findable, but it's pretty funny.
So it's like a regional TV movie or something?
No, it was a movie. It was a Hollywood movie.
Really?
Yeah. It was directed by some guy that was on the show 30-something. I can't remember his name. And who was in it? The kid, the two main kid actors that were in it were the kid that was in Jurassic Park, and then this other kid, Brad Renfro, who actually died.
Wow. Right.
They were the two lead actors, and who else? Annabella Sciorra was in it. And, anyways, it was a real movie that was shot in Minnesota. I just had a small part as a kid that bullied a kid with AIDS, so I was walking around trying to pretend I was tough.
Right.
And
were you doing theater and plays as a kid?
Yeah. I was into acting and
drama camp and class and stuff like that.
Just children's theater, local children's theater, stuff like that, and did an internship at a local theater in Minneapolis and stuff like that. Yeah, I was into it. So I was in this movie, and what I got paid for being in the movie, I bought turntables with, because at that point in my mid-teenage years was just fully in love with rap music at that point, and
right.
knew that I wanted to participate in it in some way. And I always played music and was very musical and played guitar and, you know, that kind of thing. And so
Did you pick up a guitar before you messed with turntables?
Yeah, I started playing guitar when I was like 10.
Oh, cool.
And I played like guitar and piano. And, so always, you know, like from a very, very early age, I always knew that I wanted to do music and loved playing. But DJing appealed to me, and wanting to learn how to make beats and make music that way appealed to me. And it seemed like the way that I could sort of be a part of rap music in a, you know, convincing way, because I, you know, being like a white kid from the suburbs, I think I, even from an early age, had a sort of self-awareness, like, you know, I didn't
right.
want to...
It was like a self-imposed self-awareness
Self-imposed self-awareness, right. Yeah, like, you know, just like, yeah, or just like weird guilt, you know, guilt about just like, oh, I know this thing isn't like mine, but I love it so much and I want to be a part of it. So I thought that, you know, like, okay, you know, I can be musical and I can DJ, and so that was kind of how I felt like I could be into it. So yeah, so got turntables, just basically taught myself. I didn't know anybody that DJ'd, so I just like taught myself to do it. And the only DJs I was listening to were stuff on the radio in Minneapolis. This guy Stage One had a radio show called Strictly Butter that I would make tapes off of at night.
So taping the radio, right?
Yeah, making pause tapes on the radio. And another station called KMOJ would have rap stuff on the weekends and stuff. So I'd make tapes off the radio, and Yo MTV Raps and all this stuff was just like permeating my mind. And so yeah, that's kind of what got me into it. And then eventually just started playing shows at wherever, parties and garages and coffee shops and, you know, wherever I could DJ.
So, but you were just kind of a lone wolf in that too? Like, or did, by that time,
I mean, I had a little crew of friends who were also, you know, I mean, at that time also I was getting into writing graffiti, and so, you know, you have a crew and then everybody just kind of like does the same shit and is into the same shit. But I was the one that DJ'd like out of everybody. And so, yeah, like, you know, my later years of high school, junior and senior year of high school, and from that point on was pretty much just like that became like my identity. I think that's when you discover your identity kind of as a young person. That was what I decided my identity was.
And you were born and raised in Minneapolis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Minneapolis called St. Louis Park.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is just like right outside of Minneapolis.
And you've always lived there, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever move away and come back?
No, I've always lived in the Twin Cities.
So, and that in itself, too, I mean, is such a has such a musical, like, landscape, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, and it seems like, too, even just, like, looking at the groups that you've had, too, and I don't want to jump, like, ahead too far with, like, your own projects, but it's like, they're kind of crisscross over the map, sort of genre-wise.
Yeah, for sure. Twin Cities, Minneapolis is really lucky in that regard, I think, because there is a lot of cross-pollination stylistically. I mean, it's a small place, you know, so it's, but it's very rich with talent, and, you know, people are pretty open-minded.
Right.
And there's just a lot happening for the size of it. And I mean, I think that was one thing that I think really started to happen when I was just kind of starting to come up was, you know, hip hop groups were starting to play with rock bands and jazz shows. And it was a very kind of fertile time, like late 90s Twin Cities, of like all these people kind of like meeting new people and trying new things. And there would be improv nights where I would go scratch with, you know, jazz players or you know, people would get up and, you know, rhyme sayers dudes would be like freestyling over funk players or jazz dudes or whatever, you know. It was just very loose and you know, not always great, but very inspired.
Yeah, you're kind of like finding your way through it. Mm-hmm. Did you like the Suburbs? Do you remember that band?
The band The Suburbs? Yeah. You know, I never listened to The Suburbs, but what's funny, the guitar player in Fog, Jeremy, who I've been playing with forever, he actually plays in The Suburbs.
Oh, no way. Currently?
Yeah, currently. Oh, okay. Yeah, when they emerge from their homes to play a show. He plays with them now.
Right.
But yeah, no, I never checked them. They were a little before my time.
Right. Yeah,
As
80s.
was same with like Replacements and Husker Du and all that stuff. Like all that real legendary Minneapolis like punk stuff was just a little before my time.
Right.
So I never got too deeply into that. When the time like in my teenage years, the shit that was like really happening was like the early Rhymesayer shit, really,
right.
and punk, and punk shows
right.
too, kind of simultaneously. Those were the first shows that I really started. I mean, beyond stuff that would just come through First Avenue, that I would go to regular touring concerts or whatever. The stuff that was happening locally was like the local hip hop shows.
Beyond First Avenue, like what would that be? Because I mean that seems to. First Avenue, obviously, which I love, and I love the staff there and the history of the place, but it does cast a pretty long shadow, like in a way where, as far as like looking back at like the late '90s, like in I've only been to Minneapolis a handful of times too. Like, where were you going? Like, where would you guys congregate during that seminal time?
Yeah, at that point, it was a lot of like coffee shops, and like I remember like a lot of shows would happen at like coffee shops because they were all ages. Or like where else? There's a place called Intermedia Arts, which was like kind of an arts center kind of vibe, and they would have shows there.
Like all ages type.
All ages shit. Yeah. A lot of what was going on had to be all ages. Like the audience was young, and the artists were young, and everybody was young. So it's like there was one place called Bon Appetit, which was just like on the U of M campus, just like this little restaurant coffee shop thing, and that's where a lot of those hip hop shows happened. Just kind of like just small coffee shops, cafes, wherever anybody could find, really,
right.
or just like small clubs. This place called the Dinky Towner was another one. Just like
right,
little small places.
Yeah, I think I did. You weren't the booker at the Dinky Towner, were you?
No, but I
did shows
played
there
a lot.
Right.
I just like played there all the time, hung out there all the time. That's where a lot of like what I was talking about, like sort of jams would happen with artists from all different kinds of backgrounds. Was Dinky Towner your label though? There was a label, right? I called it when I first started self-releasing music as The Fog and doing those modern hits remixes too. I called it Dinky Town Records, which was just me self-releasing stuff.
Right.
Dinky Town was where Life Sucks Die. It's like a part of Minneapolis where Life Sucks Die. We had our little clubhouse office thing, and so
was there in the same space?
No, in the neighborhood, same neighborhood. So we all just hung out there a lot. And,
right. So how did you tell me? Just because Life Sucks Die 2 has such a certain kind of cult history, especially with people that were getting it when it was being made, and it's for people that might not be familiar with it too. I mean, it was this sort of like a punk rock graffiti magazine but it only published 8 issues, right?
Right. Yeah. So it started out as just like a black and white. Like a Kinko's thing, just my group of friends took it upon themselves, to make a graffiti magazine, and a couple of us worked at Kinko's and stole everything, and it was like kind of a punk rock kind of mentality and approach, kind of outrageous and shocking and graphic and funny,
right.
And but we were influenced by like Ego Trip and On the Go and probably Big Brother, too, in a way,
right.
And like stuff like that was kind of
like sort of the New York kind of graph hip hop punk.
Yeah, or just that mixture, Can Control too, just like as a magazine, like that. I mean, there was a time when Can Control was like it,
right.
So I think we just wanted to have that approach of like it's a graffiti magazine, but we also wanted to just have it be funny and stupid and outrageous, right. And just have our inside jokes and all that stuff.
Were you there from the very beginning?
I kind of came in and really started working on it about the 3rd issue. But I was around for the whole time of its inception.
Because I know Aaron Horkey he didn't start it, right? There's another guy that started it.
No, he didn't start it. It was basically like it's basically all the dudes in my crew in the graph crew, Horkey contributed a lot of artwork for it, did the cover of the final issue, and he was around a lot at that time. He used to live with Slug, like in the late 90s, so he was always around. Everybody was kind of hanging out at that point, but no, it was just basically like everybody that started it went on to continued on the path of doing like cool creative shit in a similar vein, like the guys that went on to do burlesque design now.
Yeah, so what is that? That's just like they do all types of design, big design work.
Right? Like big design work and posters and mural stuff and t-shirts and web design, and they've gone on to do all kinds of crazy shit. And
that's Mike 2600. Who's
Mike and Wes are the guys that spearhead that. And
I did a great Dame Funk printed poster with them a lot, like maybe almost 10 years ago, where it was like a card, like a king or a
I remember that one.
Where it was it was upside down and right side up for two different LA and San Francisco shows.
I remember that one. Yeah, it was dope.
The design aesthetic is just like kind of bar none with those guys, and Aaron too, who has his own like amazing style. It was like such a unique, like stylistically, it was so intense too.
These are geniuses and have been for a long time. It's just like just a group of like super creative, funny people with a very irreverent spirit towards things, I guess would be the best way to kind of sum up that magazine. And like Ewok too, was like he's a major part of it, and this other guy Jeremy, and that's just a good group of us that I
was able to. I think this is through you too, but I did contribute some reviews.
Right. Yeah.
I think it was with you. Yeah. I think you were the reviews editor or something.
Yeah. So I kind of started kind of handling most of like the reviews.
I guess reviews is kind of like a loose term because it wasn't just like
they're more rants.
Right.
Yeah. Just like what was the scale? It was just like, well, our scale instead of being like 5 stars would be like, this album sucks, or this album is the Chronic album, or just like whatever, just like our own scale. So I was doing a lot of that stuff. I was doing a lot of the interviews when we started getting into interviewing more music people. That was kind of like I was sort of spearheading that. I did a lot of that, just the editing and proofreading, and I did some of the advertising stuff too when we got into having ads. And,
so all of it,
all that stuff. Yeah. I was very hands on. Yeah.
Did you go on to write? Were you writing elsewhere too?
I did a little bit. I did a little bit of freelance writing, just like for city pages in Minneapolis for a while, and another like local weekly in like St. Louis. I did a little bit of stuff, but I never pursued that too hard.
Right, because that was kind of also sort of like the path for certain. Even like DJ writers at that time was like, start sort of regionally and then break out. It was like the Herb magazine kind of era.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people that yourself included, like a lot of people that contributed to Life Sucks Die, were people that, went on to like, really everybody involved in either the inner circle of it or the outer circle of contributors of it, like, are just people that went on to do amazing shit, like Espo had stuff in there, and like just I don't know, a lot of people kind of at that time. I don't think I appreciated it at the time.
No, I mean, you never do.
In retrospect, I realized that that magazine had a greater impact on maybe not a ton of people numerically speaking, but the right people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was of a time when like for print music and sort of like subversive like culture type shit, like you would, if you were a fan of that, you would buy every single one of those now.
Right,
at least check for each one of those kinds of magazines.
Yeah, and be waiting for the next one, and there's like a sense of anticipation about it, and it was very cool. Like it was a real cool time. I mean, like, and the content of the magazine, like some of it in retrospect is just like completely offensive and like.
There was like porn, like pictures like crudely cut out of porno magazines.
Yeah, which tapered off a little bit towards the end of the print run, but no, it was definitely like a bunch of young horny dudes,
right?
In our interests, but at the same time, I think it was really smart, and I think it was kind of witty, and it had, like I say, just an irreverence about it, where we were writing about like hip hop and about graffiti, but in a way that had a self-deprecating thing, and and had some sarcasm to it, and I mean, I think in a big way that was, at least for me, I think that came from being such a huge fan of like Ego Trip, like I say.
Sure.
I mean, that was, to me, they just did the best job of infusing hip hop writing with humor and sarcasm.
Absolutely.
And it just wasn't like so serious all the time. They had like a little bit of like a pullback perspective of like seeing the humor in it and the ridiculousness in it, and like we wanted to have that too.
And I think most other magazines really, I think the writers, since they weren't like classically trained journalists, for whatever that might even mean, as like music style journalists, they inherently took themselves too seriously and like wanted to be taken seriously as like as critics, so they maybe at times overanalyzed things a little bit, where it's like it's almost more poignant if you can come up with a joke about something.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and also a thing that we ran into a lot at that time, even locally speaking in the Twin Cities, was we had a very playful, sarcastic attitude towards everything, hip hop included. And I think it rubbed a few people the wrong way, because at that time in the late 90s, I think there's a very stark line drawn between the quote-unquote sort of like blinged out corporate hip-hop of the day, and then the underground hip-hop of, that was when underground was like underground, and like very, there was not any crossover between those two things. There was underground hip-hop, and there was like major label shiny shit hip-hop, and it was the people's tastes didn't really cross over too much. And I remember a specific time I went to interview Cut Chemist, who was really cool. Like, I was a big fan of his, and it was a great interview and whatever. But we like showing the magazine to the dudes in Jurassic 5, and they just looked at it and just like, he like handed it back to me. He's just like, I was just like, sorry, man, like, and now it's like I get it. Like, it was bratty, and like snotty, and kind of, like we said some like brash shit in there that probably somebody who could read it and be like, you have no right to be like.
But graph, dude, if you're coming from a graph point of view, like that was the kind of
exactly exactly. It was a graph magazine first and foremost, so that which is like anarchy, and just and like not giving shit about anything, and so. Yeah, sometimes there would be times when we would present it to people, and they didn't quite get that spirit. Didn't get that spirit from it, but mostly it was pretty well received, I think, and had the opportunity to just like interview some amazing.
Yeah, who else did you talk to during that time? Because this is like late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah,
it's like 98, 99, 2000.
Right.
So
it's a pretty special period of time.
Very
looking
special.
back.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I got to interview like Cut Chemist and Dilated Peoples and Fishbone and Mr. Bungle and Qbert and MF Doom. The interview I did with MF Doom was like a semi-life-changing thing for me.
Right. Well, because he also would eventually be on your first record.
He would eventually be on my first record. I got to know the guy a little bit.
Was it in person?
No, it wasn't in person. It was over the phone. And I honestly don't even remember. I think those were the days when the phone number of things was on the 12-inch still.
Right.
And so I called the number that was on the Fondulum 12-inch.
Right.
And I don't remember if it was Bobito that I spoke to. It may have been. And it was just like, yeah, I want to do an interview with MF Doom, and it was a matter of a few phone calls later where I was just like, had the dude's number and did a phone interview with him, which and in that interview, it's pretty wild, man. Like if you go back and look at that interview, there's a part where I told him I told him his work reminded me of Charles Bukowski, and I was like, have you ever heard of Charles Bukowski? And he's like, no. And we talked about it a little bit, and then I ended up sending him a Ham on Rye, I think it was.
Wow.
And then later, years later, he comes out with Born Like This, which has Bukowski samples all over the record.
Wow.
Like he found like this Bukowski, So it was just, like little moments like that where you're just like, damn, man, just like this little microscopic part of something that blossomed into some actual, standing the test of time.
Yeah, it's priceless.
Shit, yeah, sure. Priceless. Like stuff like that was really cool. Even just like getting to know a guy that I admired so much, whose work I admired so much. Right. He was just very down to earth, and he, at that time, he was still kind of like making his rebound. That was like right during the Doomsday time.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And then I did this interview with Noriega too, which ended up sort of being kind of infamous. That's the one that people really kind of like when they talk about the magazine. To me, that's what they talk about.
What's the story behind that?
Same deal. Like Noriega was coming to Minneapolis to play a concert, and we were all big fans. And I looked at the phone number on the Tommy Boy. Like literally just like look at the back of his album. There's a phone number on there. Call it. Eventually get through to somebody, and then ask them, who do I talk to try to line up an interview with Noriega. And eventually talked to somebody there and said, hey, we want to go to the show and interview him after. And
was this that first album?
No, this was like at the U of M campus somewhere. I don't remember. It was like him and Mobb Deep, and it was just like a very chaotic show. But afterwards went to the hotel where he was staying at.
Right.
Did this crazy interview with him, and he was just hilarious, just like the funniest dude in the world, and it's just like this outrageous, hysterical interview. I think it's the first interview where he introduced the word slime into the lexicon, and it's just like, again, shit like that, where you're just like, I don't know, very one-of-a-kind experiences having come out of it, and just being really young and not knowing any better, and just like I'm going to interview Noriega, and then just fucking doing it, and like yeah, cool. So anyway, I made a few mixtapes that did what they could, and I think at that point I had just sort of reached like, I had done battles, I had won some battles and felt good about that, and made some.
So you have routines and shit, like
yeah.
Because even listening to the new album, which I was not surprised, but it was kind of heartwarming to hear. But there's like a certain texture of actual, like, going back and forth on two turntables.
Scratching, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and that was a real conscious move. Like I moved away from the turntables for quite a while, as Fog sort of progressed, and then for this last record, I knew, I really wanted to bring those back into the fold, in sort of a new, fresh way. But yeah, no, I did just, I mean, really mostly just locally. I went and did like DMC regionals a couple times, and didn't win obviously, but I did it, and was really into battling and coming up with routines and scratching, and me and Abilities would like do a lot of shows and practice together a lot, and he's sort of like the other dude in town that was like the scratch dude.
So it was like, DJ Andrew and DJ Abilities.
Yeah, and this other guy, King IXL, was like kind of like the most, probably before Abilities, he was like the only other like Twin Cities DJ that had like gone far in the DMCs, and like people knew who he was. He was really good. Is
that who like coming up? Was there a DJ to aspire towards coming up?
As far as the battle shit, IXL definitely, because he was the one that like, I had some like second generation VHS dub of like DMC, national finals where, it'd be like Babu and DJ Disc, and all
right.
these like West Coast Scratch Hamsters, and like all these dudes, and IXL was like the one dude from Minnesota on that shit. So it was like he was definitely.
Oh yeah. Is he still around?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully he's still doing something. But
right.
yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know if he's DJing or what. But anyways, so I was doing that a lot, playing clubs a lot, making mixtapes, and then I think I eventually just sort of reached a burnout point where I was sort of like musically feeling restless, and knew that I wanted to do something a little more, my own thing, and get away from the sort of competitive aspect of it. Kind of at the same time, was getting more into like indie rock, and like Radiohead was like OK Computer came
right.
out, and that kind of like really kind of blew my mind, and I listened to it all the time, or like I got into like more melodic, kind of like sadder music, and stuff like that, melancholy kind of stuff. And so
this has got to be like 2000, 2001,
yeah,
or
like
99.
It's more like 99.
Right.
99.
This is also like the the sort of the birth of Anticon is around that time.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah. And I feel like everybody, like Anticon
and Rhyme Sayers,
even Rhyme Sayers to a degree, like all these people were kind of having a similar experience, where it's like you came up loving hip hop, mid 90s hip hop, and being totally immersed in it, and then at a certain point you're like, I need to insert more of myself into this,
right,
and take more influence from not just hip hop but from elsewhere, and infuse it and make it speak to me a little bit more directly, and so so everything I was doing I was making just on a Tascam cassette 4-track, and that's how I made all my mixtapes and stuff. And I actually remember it pretty clearly when I was interviewing DJ Qbert for Life Sucks Die, which was like a huge honor for me
right.
at that time. There was a point in the conversation where we were just talking about making mixtapes and stuff, and I don't know why I blurted it out of my mouth, and I was like, I should do a mixtape that has a guitar solo on it. And he's like, yeah, cool, you should you should try that. and I feel like that at that exact moment was like, no, I should make a mixtape that has guitar on it. And that was kind of like the light bulb
right.
in my mind, where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start writing songs on the guitar and playing turntables with it. And either it's going to go on a mixtape, or I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm just going to start making songs where I play the other instruments that I know how to play, with
right.
Guitar and keyboards and a drum machine, whatever shit I had lying around. And that's how I made the first Fog record, was just started kind of doing these sketches on my 4-track of lay down, like cutting up some drums or something on the turntable, and then instead of layering more scratching on it, I'd play the guitar and
right.
wrote some chords. And then once I had those structures, I was like, okay, these are songs. I guess I have to sing, and I have to write words. Right. And I'd never done that before. And so it just was very, just happened very organically. Like, okay, I'm just trying this now. I'm trying this new thing. And it was just a very pure amalgamation of the stuff that I just really happened to love at the time, which was scratch DJs and melancholic songwriting,
right.
and singing, and just kind of brought the things that I loved listening to together, and it just grew.
Did you ever like Low?
Yeah, I love Low. Yeah.
I mean, that might be in that sphere somewhere.
Yeah, I was listening to their early records at
cool.
that time too.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're great. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then you put that first album out, just put it out on your own, and then what was that? I mean, obviously, this was an era of self-release projects and stuff like that.
Yeah. So same deal. Yeah, I self-released it. Tried to get it out there using some of the channels that I had. People I had gotten connected with via the magazine. So
right.
Revolver,
right.
Distro took some, and ATAC, and those places all took it, and then just sold it locally. And or via the magazine. We had a little ad in there where you could order it through the magazine,
right.
That kind of shit. And so it got around a tiny bit, enough to where Dose heard it. and at the time he was also dating a friend of mine, this girl that lived in Minneapolis, and so he heard it, and we sort of got introduced formally. We had met, I think, once before that when Rhyme Sayers was bringing all the Anticon dudes into Minneapolis to do shows. I had met him and Yoni and Nose Dom and all those guys once or twice before. But yeah, so me and Adam Dose kind of got to be buddies, and he took my self-released album to Ninja Tune because
he was doing some A&R work for them.
Actually he was doing A&R for Mush,
right?
Who also released a ton of independent hip hop shit at that time. He brought it to Mush and to Ninja Tune. Originally I was going to sign with Mush, but then Ninja Tune I was basically going to do the same thing that Cloud Dead did, where they released it on Mush and then Ninja Tune handled it in the UK.
Right. I
was going to do that same thing. But then Ninja Tune was like, no, we want to do the whole thing, And,
amazing.
It was, yeah. And
you must have been pretty pleased.
I was thrilled. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, just incredibly stoked, So then I got signed to Ninja Tune for a couple records, and that was, and then kind of like remixed and tinkered with the original self-released Fog record. So there's a version of it that exists on compact disc in my attic, if anybody wants one. There's that version, but then the retooled, sort of remixed version with a couple songs that have Dose on them. That's the one that Ninja Tune put out in 2002.
So I know that I missed this just for a second, but the MF Doom did the intro to that album.
Yeah.
So what was he reading? He was reading some passage.
Yeah,
right?
It's a passage. It's like the foreword to a play called "Time of Your Life" by William Saroyan, is the writer, whose work I like a lot, and I hopefully don't get in any kind of trouble for having had that happen, but that was a long time ago. So
yeah, I think the statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations, yeah. But yeah, a friend of mine just like showed me that piece of text and thought it was cool, and I was like, yeah, that's really cool.
Because if you listen to it now, I mean, it's like in the context of even Doom's career, it's just like a pretty dense like piece of material to hear in his spoken voice.
Yeah, totally. It's a powerful thing. Yeah, and man, I don't know. For as much of being like a 21-year-old dumbass as I was, that was a good call.
Yeah,
I guess I was, I don't know. It had like an old soul. Like Doom is like an old soul.
Yeah.
And I think I am too, or I was. I kind of, in many ways, I think I felt older at that time than I do now. But it just felt really right for him to do that, and so he was very gracious about it. I was just like, hey man, I got this thing, can you read it? And sent it to me, and he was just very cool about it, and read it and sent it to me on a mini disc, and
hell yeah.
Did it like that, and so that was that was how the first record kind of came to be. And that was the first time I ever got to go on tour and go overseas to Europe and play. And,
who were you with then at that time?
I mean, I had to put together a band pretty quickly. I made everything on the record myself. And Jeremy Ilvasacker, who helped me mix the record, he joined my band, and then a couple other guys, Martin Dosh and Mark Erickson. So the first incarnation.
All Minneapolis players.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. And so that was like the first live incarnation of it, and having to recreate all this, sort of like weird, off-kilter shit that I had just made on a 4-track, having to like recreate it with a live band,
right?
Which inevitably turned into like a weird rock band with turntables in it,
right?
And that was like a whole different set of challenges because I was on Ninja Tune, and when we first started touring, and promoters or venues or journalists or whoever, like anybody that was writing about it that was the first thing they saw was like Ninja Tune. So we immediately got filed under like, this is trip hop.
Right.
And then we played a show, and it was like pretty loud and pretty like rocky, you know, like me playing turntables, but a bunch of guitar and live drums, and it was real noisy and pretty not trip hop.
So people didn't really know what to do with it.
Yeah, like it really started off a very long career of like people expecting one thing and then getting another, getting another thing.
But if you look back at those records, they're all pretty like they're all a little different from one another, right?
Yeah,
and pretty adventurous in their own right. I mean,
yeah.
like, you must have been in different headspaces each time out.
Yeah,
too.
for sure. Every time I made a different record, it was a different headspace and a different zone that I wanted to challenge myself. I always just wanted to challenge myself to do something new every time, come out with something new every time. And I talked about this with Yoni a little bit too when I talked to him about it, and like it kind of, I feel like, came across as sort of like a confrontational or sort of like a fuck you thing, like, you know, I'm gonna switch it up every time, and like, you know, whatever you thought the last record I did sounded like, this one's totally different, fuck you, you know, like, I don't want you to like my shit. But it wasn't that at all. It was actually in my own mind being like, it was like the hip hop influence. It was like from battling. It was like, okay, I did this one routine and it, you know, and you liked it, but now I got to totally flip the script and like come up with some crazy shit for the next one that's totally different and like keep it fresh, you know. And that's where it came out of, was just like, you know, but it was just like my own weird version of it that happened to like all kinds of different music, right. You know. So but it was still the hip hop influence on it telling me like, okay, you did that, now what's the next shit? Like, what is the next thing that you're going to do that people aren't going to expect? It just so happened that like my choice was like, okay, the next record's not going to have turntables on it at all. Right. It's going to be a rock record. Right. You know, and in certain ways throughout the course of like what I've been doing with music in my career, that has not been helpful in the career sense. Because, you know, the person who bought my first record and dug it, you know, 3 records later, they're hearing something that could be a completely different band. And they're just like, you know, if you're not like a person who just is really open and loves all different kinds of music, I could see how a person could be completely like put off by that.
Yeah, you know? Your average fan, it takes them a lot more time to catch up to the artist than it does when it happens right inside your head.
Yeah, totally. You know? Yeah, my attention span is pretty short, and I move pretty quickly, and my tastes move and shift with, you know, pretty rapidly. And so I've just always kind of followed my instincts and done what has felt right at the time, regardless of what my, you know, radar for the perception of it could have, should have been. And so I just like done damn near every kind of music that you can do, right? And
after the first, was Jaime's Basement after the first after the first Fog thing, or was
that was after I think that was right after the Ether Teeth, the second Fog record came out. I think Jaime's came out shortly after that.
Yeah, which is, in my opinion, very slept on. I mean, kind of this is with Yoni Wolf, who's of Y, you know, who's a good friend of mine, and Dose, all those guys I've known for a long time, and really who championed your music where I could really like kept up with it through them too.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you would, I mean, Jaime's Basement is a great like basement, prototypical basement lo-fi kind of like sort of outsider folk type thing. But
yeah, I love that record. I mean, I think that record is still really good. I'll go revisit it sometimes. I'll be like, yeah, it's still, you know.
And it was done sort of on the fly too, right?
Totally on the fly. Yeah, we really wrote it and recorded it over the span of 2 weeks, and basically just kind of made a new song every day. Yeah. Wrote a new song every day or whatever, and recorded it. And yeah, it was just a great experience. We did it in the basement of Jaime's Records, which my wife Julie owned at the time.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't know that place. It does it still exist?
It still exists. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. She sold it in 2009, so a different. It's under different ownership now, but it still exists.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, but she ran it for like 10 years.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a real amazing place. That's where I met my wife. And
at the shop.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. And I just learned a ton about music in general at that place. I would go and work there a little bit and just sit behind the counter.
And they had a basement studio, or was it just a storage area?
No, it was just storage. You know, it was just like, where they kept, you know, the dollar records or whatever, and just like moved a tape machine in there for a couple of weeks. And
cool.
Yeah, cool. It was really fun, super fun. That record have many fond, warm reminiscences about that one.
Yeah, I think Yoni does too. You know, it's obviously like at a time when I feel like he was super prolific at this time too, sort of spreading his wings too from both Y and then he did Reaching Quiet and Cloud Dead, and we're all like in this circumference of this whole thing.
Yeah,
and
for
you
sure.
were changing it up too.
Yeah,
well.
I think that me and Adam and Yoni and like Hood, that band Hood, you know, everybody. I think there was kind of a circle at that time, and everybody was really profoundly influenced by each other's shit,
right?
And bouncing off of that between ourselves and among ourselves, and very like lightning in a bottle kind of time.
I think that there's definitely a especially during that time, the connection between Minneapolis, or really the Twin Cities and the Bay Area, seemed very strong, even for Atmosphere and Rhymesayers too.
Right.
It was always, the shows were really big in the Bay. I mean, I think back and forth between those kind of camps or communities, it seemed like it.
For sure, yeah, and Cincinnati too.
Right,
those guys were based too, you know, like with Scribble and
absolutely,
there's the whole kind of triangle of shit, you know, Cincinnati, Scribble Jam, Dibs. Minneapolis had like Rhymesayers and Idea and
Chicago too. I mean, there was definitely a network rather.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all that shit was like really popping off at that time. I was definitely sort of like on the weirdo outsider circle of it, but still present.
Right.
That was a really, really cool open time, and a lot just like young, super creative, fiery people, you know, just like intensely discovering these sort of new realms, and it's really neat to be a part of that.
It's incredible to look at where all those artists are now, you know, and like how the, estuaries of their career have taken them all in very different directions.
Very different,
you know?
yeah, totally. I know. It's a trip.
I mean, Fog included. I mean, so this record now is what, the seventh or eighth album, or?
Boy, let me think about that one.
Because you've done a couple.
Yeah,
smaller...
it's the fifth proper Fog record.
Okay.
There's been a couple EPs and stuff too in between. And then there's a Jaime's record. I've done now a few releases just under my own name. I've kind of like, you don't really realize it in the moment that like finally you come to a place where you're like, no, I have a body of work.
Do you even categorize it though, like per group though? Because just even hearing you say it right now and knowing like, because I associate Fog with a certain style, and then the band that I saw at South by, which was another band formation on stage, like it was a 4 or 5 piece, but
it's a rock band that it's the original lineup of the guys that played in Fog.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but it's just I think finally I have sort of learned to like put these things in a little bit of a lane of these different things that I do, just to avoid confusion among myself.
Right. Because I loved that group too, and I got to tell you, like I was in a certain headspace when I saw you play that show, but like Word is Bond, like I welled up like when I saw you guys play in Austin as that band, which it's called the Cloak Ox, right?
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, right, and that band has kind of become the avenue if I'm writing songs for guitar,
right?
That are just a little more like straightforward musically, guitar, bass, drums kind of stuff. Like that's kind of where that goes.
Right.
And then if I'm making beats or doing things a little more like electronic, or just anything that's more on the solo level, it'll be as Fog or like under my own name.
Right.
Kind of put things in little boxes like that, just to make it a bit easier, because I do a lot of shit.
Right. So what's the newest record called again? The new Fog record?
New Fog record is called For Good, and came out I guess, what was it, last in the spring.
All right, cool. And that was like, obviously a long time coming. Was it a long time making too?
Yeah, it took a couple years to make it. I did a Kickstarter to fund it, which worked.
So that just helped you like set aside the time to record
Yeah.
and mix and master it
Exactly.
and all that stuff.
Record. Yeah, it's just basically like the full recording budget to track, mix, master, pay a couple people to come in and play on it, and and it's released on Totally Gross National Product, which is Minneapolis label that my friends run.
What's up with that? Because they just I noticed that was your previous band did something on that label too, right?
Yeah. It's Ryan Olson and Drew Christofferson are kind of the guys that founded the label, and they've been putting out releases mostly by Minneapolis artists. There's some stuff not, but they've been doing it for a few years now, and they've just been such incredible supporters and cheerleaders for what I've been doing. And I definitely took sort of a dip away from things after the last Fog record, which came out in like 2007.
Right.
I didn't stop doing music, but I definitely was a little bit kind of lost in the wilderness as far as like what's my identity, like what do I do, like definitely, because the last Fog record before this one called Ditherer came out, and I guess honestly speaking, it sort of didn't do what either I or the label had sort of wanted it to do as an album, both in terms of sales or just reaching the original Fog audience, because again, it sounded just totally different. It was like a rock record,
right?
It's a cool record. I'm proud of it, but if I was a listener and I heard that, and I would, it's very strikingly different than the original records that I had made, which had kind of like a good buzz to them, and people heard them and stuff. So so that record came out, and I think there was a little bit of disappointment on my end there, like, geez, like I sort of painted myself into a corner or something here, like where do I go, like where do I go from this? And so I didn't put anything out for a while. I started doing like these weird like noise guitar releases, just self-releasing shit on a very like DIY level. I recorded a couple albums with Y, Alopecia, and Eskimo Snow, like played on those records.
Yeah, and then, you play guitar on those.
Mm-hmm,
which are incredible records.
They're great records.
Those are,
those are amazing records. And then I toured in the band Y for like all of 2010. So that took up a big chunk of time.
Sure.
And so there was a few years where I was just like just kind of refinding like who I was as a musician, and
right.
I had a series of just like weird jobs, and just got a strange time, just kind of like searching.
And you have a kid too.
Yeah, right. So I have a 3-year-old son, and really, it's weird how things kind of come together and converge. But I think really in the last 3 to 4 years is when I have been reinvigorated,
right.
And figured out, like, found some new inspiration, and I had a kid, and just really felt the urge, like, okay, I know it's not going to be the same as it was before, and I don't want it to be the same as it was before, but it was, but it's been an exciting time, and so to go back to Totally Gross National Product, these guys who are they're all from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, but migrated to the Twin Cities, and they have just kind of been so instrumental in like giving me like the belief that like I have something to say still, musically speaking, and that it should be heard, and they've just been an incredible like support system for this new stuff that I'm doing.
Amazing.
So it's cool, man. It's like feels like like obviously like I have the perspective of having a bunch of records and touring and stuff under my belt in the past, but it still kind of is feeling new, and
you're seasoned at this point in time,
yes,
right?
definitely, and that I think that helps in being like I know how to be I know what I don't want to do.
Right.
You know, kind of like, and I think I have a good radar now for like making decisions that aren't going to benefit me. I can just like take things at a little more of an easy pace right now and just do things a little bit on my own terms. But yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it has been. I mean, it's 10 years since the last one. So
yeah.
I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's good that you can even bring yourself back to a project that you started like in 2000, basically more or less, and 15 years, 16, 17 years later, like be able to come back to it with a completely relatively different perspective.
Yeah, totally. And like I think what I feel really like kind of lucky about is that I think this new record I did manage to capture some of the spirit of those original albums.
Yeah, I mean there's some I mean those turntables are in effect, are being used.
And just more like going back to sort of like the lone weirdo style a little bit, but with different players, a different approach, like obviously having developed my singing a lot, and like just like the older, wiser version of that same spirit. I'm just really stoked about that. I feel like I pulled it off. Like I knew what I wanted to do before I started making this record, and then actually did it. And that's a cool feeling.
It reminds me of Arto Lindsay. It has like like this vibe where at least because he'll have this sort of. I've worked with him on a bunch of different things over the years. So some of his material has this darker production element, like and he's never been a formally trained guitar player, but his sound is really has this kind of abrasive darkness to it, but the vocals over it have this very like delicate, calculated sort of approach where it just, it's not the same, but it feels like it's coming from that same horizon.
Yeah, that's rad. I'll take that.
Yeah, for sure. And so you said that with that label again, they're from, what's the town in Wisconsin again?
Eau Claire. So
which is where Bon Iver's like from, right?
Exactly. So all those guys like went to high school together, and so. Yeah, and that's been another like super cool sort of blossoming of a thing in the last couple of years. Is like Justin from Bon Iver is like been this huge supporter, man, and like just getting to know him and be involved with him a little bit is.
What's the thing that you're going to Berlin from here, from New York, and it's something that he's involved with too? Or?
Yeah, he's involved in curating this festival called Michelberger Music. It's basically people that own the Michelberger Hotel are throwing this festival where they're gathering a whole bunch of artists from a whole bunch of places. And letting them hang out and work in these recording studios for a week and jam and record and make whatever, and then prepare some kind of surprising and new performance for the end of that week.
As a collaboration? Like an ensemble?
Yeah, it's just like, it's very open-ended.
Cool.
It's kind of like you go there, find a buddy,
on
work something, and spit it out, and
you stay there at the hotel.
Stay at the hotel.
Dope.
and play at this crazy performance space. So like stuff like that, man. Whereas like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was sort of like in that weird hole of like, what the fuck am I gonna do next? Am I even gonna like continue on this path or whatever? Like now having the opportunity to do some things like that, I'm very grateful for it, like I very well could have just like completely dropped off the map and decided like it wasn't worth it to continue trying to put out music in any capacity other than just playing around as a hobby. I'm grateful for the fact that it's kind of, it feels like it's kind of come around a little bit, and that I've had the wherewithal to ride things out and be a little patient and be cognizant when certain things are kind of coming back up. So like Vernon's been like a huge help in that too, like recording at his studio in Eau Claire is where we did a lot of the new record, and I did a little bit of stuff on his new record, and like
fantastic,
cool.
man. And going this thing that you're going to do in Berlin, it's kind of anchors a European tour for Fog too.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, so then I go and do a European tour opening for my friends Polisa,
Right.
Another Minneapolis group as Fog. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about this earlier too, but that's like it's been a while since you've been out there as well too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And last time was playing with the full band.
Yeah. Last time was a full band Fog tour in like 2008. Was the last time
Right.
I toured in Europe. So yeah, it's been a minute.
So what's the live show like right now?
Well, it's different on depending on circumstances. Like we've been doing shows as a trio or a duo. These European shows, it's just going to be just me.
Wow.
So
when's the last time you just did solo?
Well, I've been doing shows local in the Twin Cities for the last few years, just doing like live, like improvised beat making stuff.
So
And that's been really cool. Like that's really changed a lot of how I'm approaching things live, like using, live looping and turntables and drum machines and all this stuff to kind of make beats by hand on the fly. And like that's been really cool. And like I've kind of developed like a little language with it that I'm really happy with. And so I'll be doing a bit of that. So it'll basically be like turntables, piano, me singing, some improvising.
Right.
We'll see.
Are you playing guitar too?
No guitar.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I've done enough stuff at this point where it's like I feel okay going into doing shows like not exactly knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah,
that actually sounds exciting
right.
as opposed to terrifying. It's a little terrifying, but not terrifying to where I feel like the whole thing. I have enough confidence in myself that I can do an interesting set regardless of what the setup is or what the circumstances.
And I think tonight should be interesting. Right.
Yes, tonight.
I think there's a show tonight, right?
There is a show tonight, so I have been assured. Yeah, our show got moved to a different venue, which I don't know. Twice. In the same neighborhood, though, so basically no different.
Well, I can't wait to come see the show tonight, man, and I appreciate you coming all the way here to talk with me too, man. So thanks so much, man. Good seeing you again.
Yes, man.
All right, my man.
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks. Yes. I want to send my thanks to Andrew Broder, Fog, for coming through and sitting and chatting with me here on the House List. I'm your host, Peter Agostin. If you're listening to this essentially in real time when I drop it, make sure if you're in the New York area and these shows aren't already sold out, which they most likely will be if they aren't already, catch Andrew as Fog opening up for Bon Iver at the King's Theater here in Brooklyn, New York, December 12th and 13th. I'll be at one of them. I think I'm loaning him my turntables too. So if you're at one of them shows and you see him cutting shit up on stage, most likely those are going to be my turntables, my Technique 1200s, indestructible joints. So, again, I want to thank you guys for listening. You can definitely subscribe on iTunes if you so please. You can also catch this podcast on the Stitcher app if you prefer to listen that way, and on SoundCloud.com. Opening theme produced and written by Dame Funk and Keith Ede. The show was edited and engineered by my man CJ Stewart out in McKinleyville, California, Humboldt County. And I'm going to close this joint out, this particular show, rather, with a song off of Fog's new album. This is the title track, if I'm not mistaken, For Good. I love this joint, so I figure, give you guys a taste. If you haven't already heard the new album, you can pick it up. You can even peep it out online if you just want to preview it. I'm sure it's on iTunes, but you can go to fog-minneapolis.bandcamp.com and you can peep it out there too. And just really quickly, for some context, this is like his first record in like a decade. So it's a cool return to form. So I'm going to let the show ride out to this joint. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I will catch you next week here on The House List with Peter Agostin. Peace, y'all. Take care.
Caught staring at the millionaire. by the manager of its disgusting firm. I presented a gift, a hand-carved Tibetan beggar's bowl, to house all its little bugs and little birds. Sucker punched by a method. I always knew I would have to leave this town. I knew I had to go scatter little shrapnel of myself all around.